Well, I wasn't actually always a vegan, you know. I grew up in a family where meat was a staple, like many people. Ham sandwiches, roast dinners, full turkey dinners at Christmas, Sunday roasts. Again, my family always raised me to believe that meat made you strong. You know, you had to eat that to put hair in your chest, and you have to have milk to grow, or you're going to have weak bones. You know, all the usual tripe that we got force fed as a child, and so much so that I was even raising my daughter for the first couple of years on a carny diet, a meat diet, and I was insisting with my wife, who's been a lifelong vegetarian, no, she has to eat meat because I'm not having her eat that vegetarian or that vegan stuff. She has to have milk because I did, and it's made me big and strong. And I think a lot of us go through that because of all of our family values in the past. We've all grown up expecting that is quite normal, and there's so many people that struggle with that now to this day. I used to think like vegans were crazy, and you had to have all this meat. And there was one point when I first started seeing my wife, like 10 years or so ago, that I tried going vegan because it was obviously important to her being a vegetarian. So I thought, we'd try this new, I think it was called the VB6 diet at the time. But like most new vegans, you do it so wrong, don't you? You don't replace the calorie dense meat that you're eating with substitutes or more vegetables or more carbs or whatever. And I made myself really ill. And that was it. I was like, no, veganism, load of rubbish. I can't go back to it. I'm not going to try it again. But then fast forwards, I don't know, another 5-6 years ago, and I got into this health kick. And I was trying to go to the gym, I was trying to live a healthy life, and I was still eating the meat and I was still eating the dairy. In fact, I was probably eating more because, again, I thought I had to eat it to get big and strong. But then I watched, and I hope I can say this, but I watched Game Changers on Netflix. And there was this one scene in it. The whole documentary is amazing. And if anyone gets a chance to watch it and they're into their fitness, it is radical in its thinking and in how it's presented, and it really makes you think. But there was this one scene where they got I believe it was the Miami Dolphins. It might be a different team. I'm not an American sports fan, but they got them to sit there and eat. Two of them at meat burritos, and one of them at a plant-based burrito. And he's always been vegan, And then they took their bloods, and then they reversed it, and they all had plant-based. And they showed the meat eaters just the quality of the blood after putting them through a centrifuge, however you say it, sorry, and you could just see the separation of the bloods and how cloudy it was when I ate meat. And that just hit me so hard. I was like, wow, what am I putting into my body? This isn't helping me out. This isn't making me healthy. This is shortening my life. And I was so shocked. I called my wife down from upstairs because she was upstairs working at the time, in the spare room. And she came down and I was like, right, you've got to watch this documentary with me. So I watched it again from end to end with my wife. And, it was from that point that I just turned vegan overnight. Literally, I wanted all of those health benefits. So I will honestly say, when I turned vegan, it wasn't for the animals, it wasn't for the climate, it was purely selfish, and it was for my benefit. I wanted the health things. But when you research how to eat correctly, and I did, I proper research at this time because I remember my last journey, and I started counting the calories and the macros at every meal. I had a whiteboard pen that I was just writing across the fridge at every mealtime, like breaking it down as in the carbs, the proteins and the fats and everything that's going into my body. I even created like a little black book, and I was so proud of what I was doing. But one of the key aspects was I actually felt like I was in control of my life again. I was actually taking that control back on what's going into my body. And this went on for a few months. But like most people, you start this vegan journey and then you start hearing about everything else, and it opens up your mind. And a couple of months went by, and I started finding out about the animal abuse that goes on. And I was thinking, how have I turned my eyes to this so often? And how am I not aware of this? And it was around about this time that we decided, maybe we should get our little girl to start eating plant-based as well, because, she needs to be aware of this. And so we sat down with her at the time, and we spoke to her about why we should be eating plants. We showed her like diagrams of the insides of the intestinal length of lions, predators, and the intestinal lengths of omnivores and gorillas and stuff. And we showed her diagrams of fat build-up in arteries and stuff. And yeah, I think a lot of people will probably be quite shocked that we showed her that. But then we've always been the type of parents that we don't want to just give her the information and say, no, that's it. We want to give her the information so she can make her own decision. And she's always been very strong and opinionated. And she decided, yeah, I don't want the fat in my blood. And yeah, she was 4 at the time, but we were proud enough of her, and we know how much of an individual she is, that she was going to make that decision on her own no matter what. And she did, and she's been quite vegan since then. But we weren't saying vegan back then. We were saying plant-based, because we didn't want to be, sectioned as vegans. We didn't want to be those crazy vegans from the village. So yeah, we were going through that whole education piece with her at the time, and trying to find food that she liked as well as finding out about all the animal abuse side of things. And yeah, it was just challenging going through that with her and not trying to expose her to this whole world of torture. So as much as we opened her up to these are the health benefits for her, this is why daddy's doing it, we didn't really want her to see what was going on with like the chicks and the geese and the cows and stuff. So yeah, it was a challenging time to turn vegan and make sure that, we changed all of these notions that we had in our head of like, have to be strong and eat meat. You have to have strong bones by drinking milk. It was a huge education piece, but that's how I turned vegan. And then that's how my little girl came vegan with me as well.
Based on that first experience where you'd kind of decided this doesn't work, it's not what they kind of purported, and then you went hard at it, very serious, got the whiteboard up, the whole thing the second time. How long was it before you kind of convinced yourself, no, this is right the second time, and you sort of almost finally believed fully what you'd seen in the documentary and you'd read online and so on?
That's a really good question. I felt within the first week, absolutely this is going to work for me this time, because I didn't come down with a cold, I didn't come down feeling weak and everything. The first couple of days were shaky because I was struggling to replace that calorie dense food that used to be on my plate with alternatives. But yeah, very soon after the 3rd, 4th, 5th day, things started clicking in place, knew what sort of things we should have been eating. And yeah, it all became very, very easy. I won't lie though, it was quite easy for myself on the basis that my wife is always vegetarian, so pretty much every meal that we cooked was vegetarian, with some meat slaps on top or some animal products on top of it. So it was literally just cutting that out for me and building that replacement into the meals. And looking at different meals as well, because we didn't want to just be eating the same things. So we started looking at vegan, all sorts, vegan lasagnas, proper curries, burritos, alternatives with just beans and all this vegetable goodness in there.
It's fascinating to me that you came from a health standpoint to start with, and that's not uncommon. But you've got to the path that you're at now, and the kind of in the activist space, doing that kind of thing, and I'm fascinated by that, really, because it's often from my experience of chatting to many vegans, that the folks who tend to be quite deeply involved in the activist space tend to have started there. They don't tend to have started from the health. I mean, not exclusively, but more often than not, they tend to have started there and then kind of gone further down that route and actually decided individual action is not enough. I need to do something broader. I need to do something wider. Rarely do I see somebody come into it from a health standpoint and take that approach. They often want, they want to spread the word, but they often want to spread the word through success in their sport, or being an incredible PT, or forming a vegan rugby team, or whatever it is. But they often don't go down the route of activism. So talk to me about that journey.
Turning vegan was just the beginning of a journey for me, to be honest with you. As I said, I started learning all about the animal abuse, chicks being shredded, geese being force fed, pigs gassed, cows abused, and I felt so bad for cows. Just the abuse they suffered just to produce the milk, the abuse they suffered to put a slab of meat on your plate, and down to being cannulated for no benefit health wise. And I couldn't put the two things together. And then you'd learn things like there's an acceptable level of bloods and pus for milk for people to drink, and you're like, what the fuck? What's going on? And I spent months in shock, literally in shock. It was this thing that was always ticking on my head, that I'd been party to supporting this. I'd been grown up and raised to believe this was right, and not only that, but most of society saw no issue with all of this abuse that was going on, and it really, really was shock. And at this, not the same sort of time, but soon afterwards, I started connecting like the climate crisis and animal agriculture together as well. And that's before I started doing any research on it, such as like the greenhouse gases come from cows, which we always heard about, but always thought, that's just vegan propaganda. But then when you actually see the numbers and stuff, it's scary, it's worrying. And then it's the waste runoff from the fields, it's the blatant disregard to ecosystems such as the Amazon being torn down for no reason. And then people like the president of Brazil just blatantly ignoring that he's destroying everyone's futures. And we saw the tragedies at the time. This is me and my wife, of course, of like the oil spill in Mexico Bay, where the ocean was on fire. We saw the droughts across Iraq, and we saw forest fires in Greece, and no one was caring. We saw nothing in the news. We started having to go to Twitter to learn about these things. We started having to do our own little bits of research to find out what was going on, and it all just sort of like seemed to click. And we learned that the food system that we have right now is so unmanageable and so ready and easy to collapse. We're starting to see that happen nowadays, when you're looking at like 76 billion animals can be fed, and around 8 billion humans are struggling to eat. We've got a famine at the moment in Somalia, which is just shocking, and we've grown up just seeing, like, when I was a child, Ethiopians, were really, really struggling to eat food. And you just look back and you think, hang on, we can feed all these animals, but we're struggling to feed, and if everyone went to this plant-based diet and everyone started eating vegan, the world would be a healthier place, but everyone would be able to eat, and then we just come out of a pandemic, and we learned that even though bacteria is building up a resistance to antibiotics, they pump it into farm animals, especially cows, these poor cannulated cows, so they don't lose money on their investments, not because the animal's ill, but because they don't want them to get ill. And with the animal abuse that we started learning about, and the climate crisis really hit me hard, and it started getting me down, like really, really getting me down. And I was in shock. Literally, I had no word for it, but at the time, but now I've learned it's like climate anxiety is a diagnosis. It must have been that I was suffering from. And we bumped into a stall on a vegan fair that we went to. Didn't see you there, but maybe one day. We went to the vegan fair, and we bumped into Animal Rebellion, and I thought nothing of it. I was like, oh, that's fine. My wife wanted to get into it because she was more about the animals, and she wanted to go, rescue some cows or chickens, whatever it is. So we took the details, moved on, didn't think anything of it. I never saw myself doing anything like direct action. But there came a breaking point for me, Christmas just gone, where I was sat in the office with people I actually genuinely worked with, enjoyed being around with, and we're just chatting. Yeah, they all knew I was plant-based at the time, still saying plant-based at that stage. And we were having a general conversation about Christmas, and oh yeah, we love this and we love that. And then there was this one question, which was like, what makes your Christmas? What can't you do without over Christmas? And everyone's answer in that room involved animal suffering somewhere along the lines, and it really affected me, because these people I actually enjoyed being around, and their Christmas was pinned on having an animal suffer somewhere, and I felt such emotion. I welled up in the office, and I was really sad. I felt anger. I felt despair. It was a whole whole range of emotions I went through just from that. And I left work that night, went and sat in a car, and I called up my wife immediately, and I started talking to her, explaining what had happened, and we were just going through all these questions. We were talking about it. I live 20 minutes away from home, but I spent 30 minutes, 40 minutes on the phone to her that night, just going through all of this, with me welling up with frustration and tears, worrying about my daughter's future, worrying about all these animals, you know. And I could have driven home, and we could have talked through it, and we could have put some plans in, but we both decided at that point on that phone call that we needed to stop everything and discuss it there and then. That's how much of an important issue it became for us really, really quickly. We needed to do more to save animals, more to save a planet for our daughter, you know, because everyone else was wrong, apart from all the other lovely vegans in the world, of course, but everyone else was wrong. And you know, we became those angry vegans when we were owning it, you know. We were just like, no, we've got to do something. Thankfully I changed. I'm not an angry vegan anymore, but yeah, we spent the rest of that Christmas just researching groups like Extinction Rebellion and other climate groups, and we researched animal rights groups, but there was no one that was sort of like gelling together and bringing in like animal farming is evil that we could find, until we remembered that meeting that we had with Animal Rebellion at the vegan fair, and we decided, hang on a second, both these guys are ticking both the boxes, you know, climate crisis for the future, animal welfare, you know, and we decided, why not? Let's go along and just find out a little bit more about these guys. And yeah, so that's how I got in contact with Animal Rebellion. That's why I started to go down the activist route.
Yeah. It's really fascinating to me when you talk about that philosophy of the non-violent direct action, actually the anger leaving you. And that has been my experience of everybody I've met within Animal Rebellion, is that is exactly their approach. The anger has generally, I mean, I wouldn't say like there is an anger, there's a frustration that's driving them, and a fear, if you like, and a fear for all of us. But there is also there's definitely a huge amount of love that goes along with it, and it's actually more about, you know, what can I do to take action, what has worked historically, you know, for organizations that have made change within the world, you know, and often we keep coming back to non-violent direct action as a tried and true kind of methodology, and that's been my experience. But when I talk to some of those folks we mentioned earlier, you know, the friends and family who perhaps aren't in the same world, who are perhaps talking about what makes a great Christmas for them, and it often involves these kind of things, and then they might be, you know, watching the latest Attenborough documentary and feeling sad about that, whilst, you know, taking actions in their lives that are perpetuating that issue, and then simultaneously looking on Twitter and seeing Just Stop Oil or Animal Rebellion or Extinction Rebellion doing something that is their perception is impinging upon the day-to-day life of everybody, and they're up in arms about that. And so there's this kind of, you know, constant paradox going on, and like in the kind of minds of the sort of mainstream public, if you like, who haven't necessarily put these particular things together. I'd sort of love to get your take on that, about how that has how the organisation is portrayed, if you like, in the sort of media, and led to that kind of purposeful kind of cognitive dissonance that exists within sort of all of us, if you like, or all of the mainstream public. If that question made any sense, it's more of the ramblings of of somebody. But yeah, I'd love to get your take on any of that.
It's an interesting one. Right, so Animal Rebellion, we do a lot of our own social media, as most of the direct action groups do now. So we're always able to get our story out there, and in fact, it tends to be our story which hits the media outlets before anything else, and they're aware of our activities and actions because we told them to. Part of Animal Rebellion is we take ownership of what we do. You know, gone are the days in Shack years ago where you know, things would happen and then you'd be like, oh, who done it? We don't know. You know, Animal Rebellion will pour milk onto a very expensive carpet, and we will take ownership that yes, we did this and this is why we did that, so we can get the story out of there. So as much as the media currently wants to portray us as angry vegans, which we clearly are not, because we follow non-violent philosophies, we don't hate individuals, we don't blame individuals, we actually, you know, blame the broken system, the evil of the system, and want people to realise that their individual choice is having such a huge impact on the climate, is having such a huge impact on ecosystems, and a massive impact on animal torture, you know. So as much as the media is trying to portray us as these angry vegans, you know, welding tofu and forcing it down people's throats, we're really not, you know. And yes, our actions do cause high level civil disobedient disruption, but that's only, as you say, based on non-violent philosophies from the past. And there's no way I am going to compare myself to the struggles that went on across the pond in America. It is in the lunchtime counter sittings, or the bus riders, or civil rights. And I'm not going to compare myself to Mahatma Gandhi, or even in our own country with the suffragettes. But we are facing the sixth mass extinction. That's science, that's happening now. You know, we are seeing our climate start to break down with 40 plus degrees temperatures in England, the country which is renowned for wet, cold, washed out summers. We're still in drought conditions out there. You know, we're still seeing food shortages across the world, and I could go on. You know, we know, you know as well as I do, and most of the listeners will know of the travesties that are going on a climate crisis at the moment. And you know, it's for that reason which we do this, to highlight these issues and offer this solution, this plant-based solution. I mean, Animal Rebellion have two simple great demands. You know, we need our government, as inept as they are at the moment, we need our government, and hopefully the new person that comes in will listen to this and go, yeah, we do need to support our farmers and our fishing communities to move away from animal farming and fish in our oceans, you know, and help the farmers have a future by transitioning to a plant-based food system, you know. And by doing that, it's going to free up so much land. About half the land in this country, 76% of land across the world, and that's the size of the USA, China, Canada and Australia combined, can all be freed up, rewilded, restoring, in this country alone, British beautiful countryside, you know. And across the world would have rainforests coming back, and forests and natural woods, and remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and just restore nature. So yeah, by doing these actions, we raise that awareness.
Yeah. Do you think that the fundamental issue is that the point about the sixth mass extinction is still not in people's minds in the mainstream? So when they look at, like, and we'll talk about the specific protest that we the most recent, the kind of the milk pouring and so on. We'll talk about that in a moment. But do you think that because that message isn't quite into the mainstream public's mind, so they understand, you know, even the phrase climate change as opposed to, you know, a climate catastrophe or climate emergency or climate crisis, but the climate change is the one that's used, which sort of is quite gentle in a way as a term. It doesn't speak to sixth mass extinction. It doesn't speak to there is a real fundamental risk of, you know, society, ecosystems collapsing in front of us as we speak. You know, it doesn't speak to that phrase climate change. And you know, when we see, I don't know, Premier League football team saying they're going to do a climate change day, and you know, it's all a bit friendly and a bit light and gentle. And so do you then think that that's the issue when it comes to the way that the you know, a protest is portrayed, is kind of, well, you know, that doesn't seem commensurate with, you know, climate change. You know, why pour milk on the floor when, you know, it's climate change? You know, it's not they're trying to raise the alarm about a six mass extinction. Like there's that disconnect in people's mind, which therefore allows them to sort of criticize those actions as not commensurate with the scale of the problem. Do you think that is still fundamentally the issue, that the six mass extinction bit isn't in people's heads?
I think that has a huge effect. Sorry. I think a huge effect that waters down the climate crisis to the climate change is caused by the media. You know, I believe a lot of media organisations out there deliberately water this down. They don't want it to be in the news as much. I mean, you only have to have a look at the Daily Mail and they report more clearly on Meghan Markle, you know, or what celebrity said this, that, and the other. And then further down, you'll see that they will start bashing Just Stop Oil or Animal Rebellion or Insulate Britain, as opposed to actually going, this is what these guys are saying. This is the issues, you know, and that has very much been the case until recently. That no matter what, the media will always portray, like you said earlier, activists who are concerned like myself, who are willing to take a stand and make a sacrifice. They won't portray them in a positive light, and they will water down things like the climate change, and you will have greenwashing going out there with car companies saying this is the most eco-friendly, and you will have scientists out there who are, you know, inserting not incorrect but, you know, misleading information to water down the effects of climate crisis as well. So people are a little bit, they don't know what to believe, which is why it's even more important for scientists, individuals, world leaders to stand up and say, this is the actual situation. This is why you're seeing the hottest, the coolest summer for the rest of your life, you know, now. So people are more aware of it. I would like to say though, of recently, with all of Animal Rebellion actions, the media hasn't actually been questioning our message. They haven't been saying what we're saying is fundamentally false. They've actually taken attacks of, you know, criticising our actions more than our messaging. And I think that's quite refreshing, and it does highlight a change, that the media isn't getting away with pushing away our messaging. They're accepting it, and they're pointing out that we're these crazy vegans that are doing whatever we're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And in fact, as you said it then, I was reflecting on some of the headlines I've seen, some of the bits and pieces that are out there, and I've definitely seen, methodology criticised, 100%. But I haven't necessarily seen motivation criticised as much. And in fact, I've seen a couple of articles that have said, you know, message is great, but this isn't the way to get it across. That kind of vibe, which I guess is progress.
Yeah,
So let's sort of hit the nail on the head, as it were. Let's talk about the particular action. In case anybody, I'm sure everybody who's listening to this podcast is well aware of the particular action that we're talking about. But in case anyone has been under a rock for a while, or been on a long holiday or a digital detox or something, it would be good to just, like, you know, from your point of view, explain the kind of the background, and then leading up to, and then what was done.
Yes. So Animal Rebellion, we very recently in September completed a successful campaign to stop the supply of dairy to UK supermarkets. We created civil disruption outside of dairy distribution sites, preventing the flow basically into supermarkets. And for 2 weeks, 3 weeks really, over the beginning of September, we were successful, and there was shortages across the southeast of England for dairy, which was a huge success for us. It caused the only reason it stopped is untimely is because the Queen unfortunately passed away, and we made the decision to halt our campaign and take a step back, because we were very conscious of the nation's mood, and we wanted to reflect that solidarity. And, you know, that's why we had to stop that campaign early. But as part of a run up to that campaign, we actually created a media sensation through civil disobedience, civil resistance again, by doing a milk pour in Harrods. I'm sure quite a few of your listeners and yourself are aware of that situation. We had a team go in there and start pouring milk on the basis that that milk is stolen anyway. As soon as it is taken away from the mother cow and not given to the calf, it's a stolen product and it's wasted. So we made a visual spectacle by pouring that milk onto the floor and again bringing that awareness around our campaign. That was quite successful. We obviously completed the campaign, and then afterwards we had a vegan march in London, prepared for the 8th of October, where we were getting vegans to come across the country in solidarity with our friends over at Just Stop Oil. We were going to march through London and have some cheeky vegan fun on the way, to highlight again the concerns around animal farming, the climate crisis we find ourselves in, the struggle around our existing food system, the loss of our ecosystems, and the cost of living crisis we now find ourselves in, all of a result of our government unwillingness to listen to the experts. We decided we needed to create another event which would raise awareness around all of these issues and our upcoming march on the 8th of October. So a group of us, actually the two of us, decided to recreate the milk pour, and we would do so at Fortnum Mason, a very high-end department store in London, not the type of place where anyone that suffers from the cost of living crisis would be shopping. And again at Selfridges as well, a very high-end supermarket right on Oxford Street. So we entered the premises, we removed the stolen milk from the shelves, liberated it, took it upstairs in Fortnum Mason, and made our civil disobedient action known to everyone. And again in Selfridges we found a nice little cheese display, again another dairy product which is stolen from the moment it's taken from the mother cow, and repeated the same action across that, again as a huge spectacle to raise awareness.
Can we get into some of the potential criticism? That'd be okay. So I've seen actually not exclusively sort of non-vegan folks, but I've seen many vegan folks, in fact, criticising the particular methodology here. Again, I think as you raised earlier, there's no question about the motivation, but I think there's definitely been some, and you've probably seen some debate, some discussion over the methodology, over the kind of, yes, this isn't food that we agree with, it's not food as far as we're concerned in the vegan community, but this was something that somebody could have eaten somewhere, and therefore there's a waste element to it. I'd love to get your perspective on these things and sort of give you almost the right of reply, if you like. I guess we're talking to lots of people on Twitter and all sorts of different things who've made these kind of comments, not necessarily directly, but it would be good to understand the sort of, from your perspective, your take on that kind of criticism.
With regards to it being a food that someone else could have eaten, anyone that's struggling to purchase those foods would not be buying them from Fortnum & Mason's or Selfridges. The price of the milk there was extortionate. I can understand that some people are quite upset that they see it as wastage, and it's a shocking thing. But the level of the crisis we are currently in, where people are struggling to eat now because there's not enough food to go around, because the government won't listen to the experts and they won't transition us to a plant-based future. All of this can be solved if we go to a plant-based future. So the level of importance, the catastrophe we find ourselves in and the action we do is proportionate to each other. So yes, we want to create that shock. And it's only we do that because we have to, because the government isn't listening to the experts. So we need to highlight these issues so people will actually stand up and listen and maybe make that change. And by making the change to a plant-based future, by resolving the climate crisis, the two things are interlinked. All of a sudden we'll be able to produce more food on less land, and we will stop animal farming, which is pumping more greenhouse gases, more waste into our rivers, and the planet will become healthier. It's all interlinked, and the food will be freely available. We wouldn't have to, be subsidising animal products, which is the only reason that milk and meat is kept so artificially low, because of current government subsidies. Those government subsidies could be put into more plant-based options, which would make them even more affordable. And currently plant-based milk is actually cheaper than dairy milk. So the fact that it's being wasted is just a shock thing. But if you're worried about the cost of the milk, have a look at these plant-based milk alternatives as well. And if you don't like the taste of one, try another. There's so many options out there now. It's crazy.
How about I'll chuck another one in there, if that's all right, just because there's a few that I've seen. So another one I saw was around demand, that and this was more actually less about the milk pouring directly, because I guess the volumes are smaller, and more about sort of stopping milk en route to supermarkets, etc. Is that by stopping those, ultimately there's more demand to get those filled back up, and so on and so forth. So all we've done is kind of wasted a batch in quite a scale that then couldn't be sold because of use by dates and so on, and it would just have to be replaced. So again, I'd like to get that sort of steer, and I guess it's a similar debate, just on a slightly bigger scale. But again, be good to get your take.
The one I've seen around that is the poor cow is going to be milked even harder. So they're gonna, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're causing more animal abuse. To be honest with you, that cow's going to be milked the same anyway. The cow has to be milked because of the way they're bred and the diet that they're on. They're producing all of this milk, and it becomes painful for them if they're not milked on a regular basis. And a lot of farmers out there confuse it. It's, the milk, the cow loves this is why it keeps running in. No, the cow's in distress. It needs your help now. So I don't necessarily agree that by us drilling tyres or blocking these distribution sites, we cause more distress to the animals. Those animals are in terrible conditions now anyway, and the only way to remove that is to stop doing it, to go towards this plant-based future. Because the milk wasn't getting out there, did supermarkets put more of an order in? I doubt it. I believe they probably have standing orders, and if something was missed and it wasn't delivered, it was the consumer that couldn't get something, or they had to go for a more expensive option. I don't necessarily believe that we created more of a demand.
This one's more of an ideological one, I guess, but one that I've seen from some folks who, again, in the vegan community, who would say that what we need to do is relate to people on a level, where they're at the moment, and they're not in a place that, the shock, almost the shock doesn't work. What works is, sitting around the table, and, they might be folks who would say, if I, make great food for people, or, I perhaps represent in a particular sport, or I do something that's kind of mainstream, if you like, but with a vegan twist, I can meet people where they are, and they're more likely to come with me on the journey than seeing somebody, doing a milk pouring activity where actually it confirms all of their sort of suspicions of the angry vegan, if you like. They can it fits that narrative. So therefore they're actually pushed away from veganism rather than brought to it by, somebody making delicious vegan pizzas, as an example.
No, I get that. Animal Rebellion, we do softer approaches as well, such as The 8th of March was a vegan picnic to start off with. So it was everyone come down, we're going to share some vegan food, we'll have talks, and we'll all get to know each other. In my local area, Animal Rebellion actually had a picnic with other climate groups as well. We've now got a climate emergency centre that's opening, which we're hoping to make fully plant-based. And again, this is all, nice things to do. We're looking towards the future as well. I myself am very keen on setting up a vegan food bank in the area. Again, all Animal Rebellion orientated. So we do these softer things as well. They just don't get reported on in the press. It's unfortunate.
Right.
So yeah, I could understand that some people see our actions and go, well, yeah, they're definitely angry vegans, and we do, that's what they're all about. They're just the milk pouring guys. But we're not. We're the guys that are trying to show you how important an issue we're in. Again, with sixth mass extinction, with all these experts such as Harvard and Oxford, and even the United Nations themselves have released reports saying that rewilding is the key solution to the climate crisis. It's going back to nature, restoring our wildlife, and removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And the only way we're getting people to listen is by spilling a little bit of milk at the moment, and I'm proud of
Yeah.
what I did. I feel empowered by what I did. And yes, I am making a huge sacrifice, and I'm looking at jail time, and I'm looking at a lot of strife around me and my family. But we are able to carry our message to not only the general public, but to the government, and people are listening. It was only this week that Suella Braverman was referring to the wokarati tofu eating guardian readers, and if that isn't a nod to Animal Rebellion, I don't actually know what is. It's been an amazing journey. So again, I would apologise for any personal disruption. For example, in the Selfridges where I did pour the milk, there was a gentleman that was stood quite close to the cheese counter, and I said to him just as I started to pour the milk, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind stepping back? I would hate for this to get splashed on you," because I'd hate for him to go home smelling of milk. That's my job that day, to go home smelling of milk, which was disgusting, by the way. But we don't want to be here doing this. We don't want to be causing this level of disruption to normal people, stopping them from getting to their jobs. But on the other hand, we're not going to apologise that we have to do this. We need to raise the awareness around it. And history shows that this type of high level, highly visible civil resistance, with this type of display, works. It changes the evil system that we find ourselves stuck into. And it's the best way of going about it. It's more successful.
Yeah, so what I'd love to kind of understand, Steve, from your perspective, and I appreciate we have talked at length about the almost the negative side, or the criticism, and and I wanted to, because I want people to hear your side of the discussion, because I think all too often, if you follow mainstream media, and our algorithms in our social media are all built to show us the negative sides of things, and to get us inflamed and get us angry, and show us the opposite view to the one we might hold, and all those kind of things, so that we get we get stoked up. I wanted to kind of almost like I said, not that you need to have a right to reply, if you like. Your actions speak for themselves, and they are what they were. But I wanted to kind of put that out there into the world, if you like, in case there are folks in the vegan community who haven't heard your side of it. I wanted to hear that side of it. But I also wanted to talk about the positive success of it, from your perspective. Do you feel like it's done what you intended it to do as an action?
On a personal basis, yes. For myself, it allowed me to do more of what I wanted to do. It allowed me to carry my own message out there, with regards to everything we've discussed so far. It's made me a superhero to my little girl. It's made me stand out to everyone in my local community who are split. Some of them are like, yes, he's standing up for something which is right, or he's standing up for something he truly believes in. family members as well. Some of them have been quite supportive in like, yeah, well, good for you. You stand up for it. But yeah, when it comes to successful animal rebellion, it's hard to measure. Yes, we can have a look at the amount of media coverage we're getting, and the amount of TV shows that we've been on, and radio interviews and magazine interviews, and the amount of social media hits out there. Interestingly, a great way of measuring a success would be how many hits you're getting on Google searches. And yes, that has rocketed through the roof. So there's a lot more people trying to find out about Animal Rebellion. Yeah, and if you have a look at the growth around the country for Animal Rebellion, that's also another good key indicator of the amount of people that believe in our message. And we now have groups across the country who work with Animal Rebellion. We have Animal Rebellion groups set up in hubs around the country as well. So yes, the mobilisation, the growth is definitely a key indicator. And I would say, yes, it has been successful on so many levels. And yeah, there is a lot of negative out there, but again, that probably comes down to what you said, the polarising media wanting us to paint us in this fashion, that, why are we wasting everyone's time? But yeah, even in those comment sections, you will find some good comments in there now, whereas previously you maybe wouldn't have. And it comes back again to the media, the messaging. They're not disputing what we're saying. They're not disputing the experts that we quote. They are just disputing our tactics. And that, to me, when I first realised that, was a huge indicator that we're having some success. People are listening to the Animal Rebellion message. And that gives me hope for the future. If the media is already listening to our messaging and our hope-based messaging, then surely there will come a time where more of a media will turn around and go, these guys are right, excuse their actions, but they know what they're talking about. And there are some articles out there now that say that. So I'd like to see more of them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure getting a fully paid up member of the Guardian reading, tofu eating, wokerati on the podcast. So I appreciate your time, Steve. But it'd be remiss of us not to tell folks where to go to find out a little bit more about Animal Rebellion and maybe even get involved.
Yeah, well, the easiest thing to do is go to the Animal Rebellion website, which would be all the W's, animalrebellion.org. You can also do a search for us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even on TikTok. I know there's some videos on TikTok, and I excuse all of the videos you see of myself up there. But I promise you, it all comes from the heart, and I just want a future for everyone. I love everyone. I want everyone to be able to grow up and have this lovely country. So thank you. Wow.
Steve, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.